And we're there at 7 o'clock.
All right, let's do it.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to part 2 of Beginning Cross Country. This is the half of the agenda we're going to cover tonight. This first one is just an overview of, so to speak, the modern silver task. There's been some changes recently in how to fly it with a secure logger. Roy will give us a guided tour straight out to Taunton. I'll be back with some overview of weather. And then again, what I think is the highlight of the presentation is Roy's choosing fields, where we'll get to look at fields from the air and the ground and discuss how to land in them and what to avoid. Then at the end, we'll have a review. We're happy to answer any questions. I'm going to go back to our virtual meeting rules here because we got a little twisted up last time by having the host mute everybody's mic. So we'd ask you to do the same. Each of you individually mute your mics and kill your video. And feel free to send us any questions via chat, and whoever's not talking will try to either answer those questions or interrupt to ask the presenter or wait till the end of that segment. And so I will advance to, we did that, to this. Now we'll go from here. All right. So this is going to talk about the silver badge. So the silver badge is made up of 3 components. There's the distance component, which is mostly what we're talking about. There's a duration component. So you've got to log a flight of at least 5 hours. And the gain, which is 1,000 meters or a bit over 3,000 feet. If you're careful and you go slow for your silver distance, you might get all 3 of them in one. As an interesting aside, I had a friend who was desperately trying to get his 3 diamonds without a badge to pin them on. And the only way you can do that is to have completed all 3 of the diamond tasks and never gone for a 5-hour documented flight. And so he went to get his diamond distance in Mifflin, and he achieved it, and everybody was congratulating him, and he was all pissed off because he did it in 5 hours and 10 minutes. So anyway, the silver distance used to be a leg of 50 kilometers, starting anywhere, ending anywhere, if you were going to document it with a flight recorder. They changed that rule because that allowed a task that could be 25 kilometers to the east of the airport and 25 kilometers to the west of the airport, and you really were never out of gliding distance of the airport, and it wasn't really achieving a cross-country flight. So the new rule is you have to go 50 kilometers from your release point. And so that, however, there's a bunch of advantages to that new rule, which is you don't have to declare the task. You literally can just take off. You need an OO, official observer, to document that your logger is in your glider and you're the one flying it. But once you release and you've marked your release, then you can fly away 50 kilometers, and basically the first tick into over 50 kilometers can count as your destination. And that helps in a bunch of ways. We'll talk about it. Using a secure logger, the club has, at the start of this, is a picture of the Colibri. We had one of these, I believe we still do, that was donated by Fred and is available for use for anybody. And so, Robin, can you mute your mic? So the intent of the law for a secure loggers. It's that the pilot declared the task before takeoff, but as we discussed, it's not required for the silver distance. The pilot in question actually flew the task. It's not fair to go for your silver by sneaking a logger into the back of DJ's glider. The pilot flew the flight with no outside help. This is a requirement of the silver task, that you are really expected to do it yourself, not lead follow, not asking somebody on the ground. And the pilot had continuity of flight. You didn't land and get a relight, etc. The pilot made the required turn points, and in this case, it's really that your start is marked correctly and your end point is more than 50K away. So that's what we're trying to do. The letter of the law you can find in the Sporting Code Section 3. Here's a link to it. If you simply search for FAI gliding, you'll find all kinds of stuff. But there's a lot of, those are the rules, the hard rules for all of the badges. I've been asked to do a presentation on more advanced badge flying and record flying and the kinds of things to watch out for. And I'm happy to do that in the future. And if anybody has any questions about, the nitty gritty of doing this, just shoot me an email. I'm happy to help you out. So I checked with the badge dude, and there's no declaration required. So in doing that, you don't want to have problems with the logger of having the logger say, well, actually, let me back up here. A secure logger can log your declaration, can log information about the pilot, information about the glider. All of that stuff is required for diamond distances or diamond badge levels. Now you have to have an electronic declaration, which means you've got to get more familiar with these secure loggers. But in this case, the best thing to do is keep the pilot generic, keep the glider generic, and keep the task empty, and there won't be any conflict with anything that was already in the logger. I think this is how we last set it up. My guess is it's probably still that way. So you need to have an official observer note your takeoff time. In order to be an official observer, I'm not positive, but for sure, anybody with a badge leg of silver or above can be or gold and above can be an official observer, and it may be less than that, but you won't have any trouble finding anybody along the Great White Row to be your official observer. It's everybody's happy to help, and really they're there to perform those tasks that I talked about, making sure it's you in the glider and watch your takeoff, note your takeoff time so that they can attest to the fact that you flew that task with that logger. We talk about notches in the barograph days. You would often dive down and make an altitude difference, a sudden altitude difference would mark your release from a tow or mark your low point for an altitude gain. The preferred method of notching with a secure logger is make a tight 360 when you get off. And that just makes it much easier to show that this was your release point. If you, particularly in wave, you can be towing up and making a nice steady gradual climb, flying straight away, get in the wave, release, and keep going straight, and nobody knows where the tow ended. So 360 at release, and really, that's it. It's very simple. It's become much easier to do because of this ability to go from release to your destination as a mark in the air. And Roy's going to cover the 1% rule that we talked about last time, which is still important. The 1% rule is in place, but the nice thing about this new system and these new electronics is you're far less likely to run into them. If you go from here to Taunton, which I think is Taunton is what Roy's going to talk about now. If you release at 3,000 feet and you arrive at Taunton at a respectable pattern altitude, or more likely above it, then you get that benefit of being 2,000 feet in the air, say, when you get to Taunton. If you released at 3, you've only eaten up 1,000 feet of altitude between release and finish. And the 1% rule, I think, for that flight is probably 2,500 or somewhere around there, where I'll talk about it. So that's the end of my presentation. So let me figure out how to, you want me to hand you back the host, Roy?
First, you need to stop screen sharing, and then we may not need to do that, but you got to
Okay,
stop screen sharing.
I'll do that. I'll do that. Let's try that.
Okay. And if you've done that,
It's working.
let's see. Is
You're
it
good?
working?
Yep.
All right, hang on. And let's go up here and go to that. And there. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So is that looking right to you, Rick?
Yep. Just says Sterling to Taunton, full screen. You got it.
All right. So Sterling to Taunton we picked because, again, we're trying to come up with programs that work for the lower performance club gliders that club members are going to be flying, including the 126. And this flight is absolutely doable in a 126. It's 88 kilometers. It's going to be generally downwind on a good day. It's pretty easy navigation. Most of what you're going to do is find Route 495 and follow it. And you stay completely away from most of the controlled airspace. You're not dealing with Worcester. You're not far enough to the east to be concerned about the Logan TMA. The course is usually downwind on a good day, and it has pretty easy airport spacing. The biggest problem with it, in fact, is the very beginning of it. Let me talk a little bit about the 1% rule because it helps you understand. Again, the concept, what we're trying to do is to prevent somebody from taking a 10,000 foot tow and then a straight glide right to any place and saying, gee, I did myself a distance. So what it means is that your achieved L over D for the entire flight has to be better than 100 to 1. For illustration purposes tonight, we're going to assume a landing at Taunton and pretty much, a glide to a landing, which we won't normally do, but it explains how the rule works. 88 kilometers, 1% of that is 2,886 feet. We have a start elevation at Sterling of 459 feet. The elevation at Taunton is 43 feet. So we have a terrain altitude loss of 416 feet. Basically, we're going downhill. When you do the math, you take the 2886 and subtract the 416, and your maximum tow height is 2,470 feet. Again, it is possible to do this flight with a higher tow, with a 3,000 foot tow. But in that situation, you have to have a GPS fix at Taunton that is high enough that when you measure your tow release point and your GPS fix, you have done at least 100 to 1. Now, let's talk about what our course looks like. And I'm going to get out my trusty laser pointer here. So if you can see this all right, this is Sterling up here. And we've got Taunton Municipal here. One of the fun things about this course is that it doesn't take very long, even in a 126 downwind, to go 88 kilometers. So you've got the option of saying, okay, I'm over Taunton. I think I'll go to Plymouth, or I even think I'll go out to Marston's Mills or the Cape Cod Airport if you want to do that. And it's entirely possible to do that. Of course, looks a bit like this. And you've got airport spacing pretty well. You can see you're far enough away from the Logan TCA. You're nowhere near Worcester. It's all airspace that you don't much have to worry about, and pretty much airports. The initial section of it is probably the most difficult, but notice this thing here that you see right here, the halfway point between Sterling and the first airport is right as you cross Route 290 in the area near Solomon Pond Mall. That's an area, there's another way of looking at it here, but you wind up right about here at Solomon Pond Mall. Now, when we first did this program, we used to talk about Marlborough as being a downwind escape airport. It is not anymore. We talked about this the last time. This is what Marlborough Airport looks like today. It is absolutely unlandable. Part of preparing for this program was for us to go out and look at some of these fields to make sure we weren't sending you someplace where there were dragons or alligators to eat you. Marlborough is permanently closed now, but it really isn't on your direct course, so that shouldn't be an issue of concern. What is interesting is this little airfield here, which is, it's UNK, they call it unknown on the sectional chart. But actually, it's owned by a fellow named Garabedian. We'll talk about that in a second. This is your departure from Sterling. You're heading out. You've got the town of Clinton over here. And the midpoint of the first leg is right near Solomon Pond Mall. We're going to talk a little bit about these fields more in the section on off-field landing. But the bad news is, guys, this photograph was taken 10 years ago. And essentially, this entire area is now built up with apartment buildings. There's a big hotel over here. This area is still landable in an emergency, but this area isn't because you can't get a good approach into it. So think of this as only an absolute last resort emergency, but you really shouldn't need it. It's 13 kilometers from Sterling and 13 kilometers from this point to the next airport. This is the halfway point. So you don't need at 30 to 1 much more than about 15 or 1600 feet to fly 13 kilometers. And hopefully you're going to be out there at 3,000 or 4,000 feet crossing 290, and you're going to have a good glide on the next airport, which is the one that's owned by Mr. Garabedian. Again, it's always called on the charts unknown. I don't know why. The local people know it as Garabedian's. And this is what it looks like. It's a paved strip. It's a private strip. This is the view. We're looking here to the southwest. And this is Garabedian's hangar. He flies, I think, like warbird replicas and light sport aircraft. Couple of things about the airfield. It is very truncated and narrow out in this area here, and probably not flyable or not landable down there for an 18-meter or maybe even a 15-meter glider. The airfield is much wider at this end. As you can see, the approach all the way here is pretty wide until you get to this cross line. So if you have to land here, you want to land, on runway 29 and stop short of the first part where it really gets narrow after that. I've never met Mr. Garabedian. I know that he had a lot of trouble with his neighbors, but by all reports, he's a pretty nice guy. And I've never landed there. I have flown over to 10 feet in both the Citabria and the Cub, but the wheels never touched the ground. So that's your first checkpoint. It is 26 kilometers from Sterling. To give you an idea of where Garabedian is, this is it here on this chart. Now, just to orient yourself, this squiggly road is the Mass Pike. This straight road is Route 9. This north-south road is 495. So we are right pretty close to the intersection of the Mass Pike and 495 here. Now, at that very intersection are a couple of distinctive landmarks. One of which is this big complex here, which was the warehouse for many years for the Cumberland Farms convenience store chain. And the across the way here is a railroad yard that offloads automobiles that come in on the trains that go under this train bridge, which is on 495. Just to orient you here, this is the Mass Pike, this is 495. Cumberland Farms is here, and Garabedians is right up this hill. The picture just clips it off, but it's up there. You should be cautious because on the north edge, there is a short tower that's about, I think, maybe 400 feet high, but it shouldn't be a hazard at all. But this is easy to find. It's pretty distinctive. It sits up by itself on the hill. Next stop is Hopedale. Somebody asked me between the last version of this program and tonight's to put some names on the airports, and I did agree to do that and mark the slides so that people would go back and look at the pictures. But we're not going to do that on the land out fields for reasons I'll explain later on. Essentially, I'm not trying to teach you to land in that field. Some of the fields we're going to look at don't exist anymore. I'm teaching you how to set up an approach to a field on your own. This is Hopedale, and another view of Hopedale. Here, it's a north-south runway. I think it's about 2,800 feet long. I've landed gliders there once and airplanes there many times. And the good news is there's a restaurant right here. And they have really good steak tips with Caesar salad. Ask me how I know that. And this is your next checkpoint. And after this, we have some sort of interesting checkpoints that we'll talk about, being an airport that no longer exists, but the remnants of it still exist. This is an old photograph of the old Norfolk Airport. This was essentially where MTSA flew for many years until approximately 1978, when it moved to Mansfield. And it was a single runway airport for many years, and then a portion of it was paved with a taxiway. But one of the things that's happened now is that it's become a housing development, particularly right in this area here. The remnants of the old runway are still there. It is not landable. I repeat, the runway is not landable. It has trees and all kinds of branches and stuff growing up through it. But the grassy area is. And the grassy area has a land preservation restriction on it. And I walked it last year, and all it had on it was a row of posts, which are essentially bird feeders. Let me show you another picture. This is a Google Earth image. You can see here where the housing development began. And there's a cul-de-sac right here, and they built houses out in this area. But this area here is still possible to land in. The problem with this area is it's not going to be easy to get the glider out. They try very hard to keep snowmobiles and off-road vehicles and motorbikes and stuff like that out of there. So it's a little bit difficult to get a trailer onto that field. And so I would view this as an emergency field. It's only about 6 miles from Hopedale anyway. The next stop on this is Mansfield, which is a place that I flew for many, many years with MTSA. And this is Route 495. Remember, I said we're basically following Route 495. This is the airfield here at Mansfield. This is the Norton Reservoir. And one of the convenient things about Mansfield is this is a triangular shaped island in the middle of the Norton Reservoir, and it points right at the airfield. In addition, Route 495 goes right by the airfield. It's a pretty busy airport nowadays, and you should expect to see other people in the pattern. But this is your stop before Taunton. And your next stop is going to be your destination airport, and that's going to be Taunton. And Taunton looks like this. Single runway with a separate taxiway. And it's essentially I think the runway runs northwest, southeast, and pretty easy to fly. Now you have the option, if you're still high there, to keep going on the way to Plymouth. You can go to Plymouth if you like. Do not land in the reddish-brown fields. They're not fields, they're cranberry bogs. And there are bunches of them out there, but back in the days when we were at Mansfield and at Norfolk, we flew many times from there to Plymouth, and it's an enjoyable flight, bearing in mind that Plymouth itself is also a pretty busy place. So that's my tour of how to fly from Sterling to Taunton. And I think, Rick, it goes back to you until we start my section on off-field landings.
It does. Can you go back to the original overview map slide? I just wanted to revisit in my head. Yeah, the sectional.
The original overview of this?
Yeah, I think it's that sectional, isn't it?
Oh, okay.
Or the very beginning?
This. Yes?
Yeah, but down to the sectional that shows the
On the
path.
section. Okay, got it. And what do you want to see?
You actually drew the path on there before. I was just
right there.
There it is. That's what I wanted to see. Yep.
Okay, so this is Sterling.
Yep.
This is the unknown field Garabedian, Solomon Pond Mall right in the middle. And this is 495. We're just flying right down 495 to Hopedale. Somebody's got a microphone on. And from Hopedale to Mansfield here, and then down to Taunton.
Yep. All right, great. There was a question that I answered by chat, but the question was, are we allowed inside the Mode C Vale? And my answer was, we are, because we don't have an engine-driven electrical system, so we're exempt from that requirement.
The answer is yes, you are allowed in the Mode C Vale. You don't have an operating electrical system. This is fairly, if you want to get sophisticated about it, the way to do this is there's three things you will see down here. I want to see if I can do this just a moment. On show on this slide. Great. Okay, now, I'm sorry. Yep. Okay. The stadium that you see right here, which is on the very edge of the TCA, is Gillette Stadium where the Patriots play. In addition, right here, which is very easy to see, are two prisons, the Norfolk State Prison and the Walpole State Prison, which are both in this area. And lastly, right at Mansfield here is a water tank. So if you stay on the southwest side of the prisons, the stadium parking lot, and the water tank, you're not going to be anywhere near the place that you shouldn't be. And you can sneak under there at 30,000 feet, at 3,000 feet, but it's not really a place you want to be.
Yep.
And it's a nice place to fly. remember that what's happening is you're beginning to get some convergence as the northwest wind on a good day in New England is bumping into the sea breeze, which is coming in this way. So it's fairly common to see the area between Mansfield and Plymouth, depending on the strength of the wind, to be going up like stink everywhere. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of you folks will see me on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, and my first turn point on the triangle is usually Taunton, because it can be a really good place to go. Now, if you have a big cloud field here and absolutely nothing here,
I was going to say.
that means the sea breeze has punched in there, and you're not going to succeed. Any other questions that I should
There was one more about, do you have to stay below 7,000 feet inside the Vale? And
No, you have to stay below 7,000. You have to stay. The answer is no.
okay.
You are not limited to height here when you're outside. No, we're not talking about the Vale. I'm talking about the inverted wedding cake, which is around Logan Airport.
Yeah,
In
which
this
you cannot,
area, you are prohibited.
yeah,
But
either
frankly,
in or above.
but frankly, you see this blue line, right? You see this blue line. You know what they are. And so you're going to keep your eyes open. It is not uncommon to be at 5,000 feet at Mansfield and look down at some big astro pig that's coming in to land at Logan. There's a regular run that comes in from the south, and you just got to keep your eyes open. All right, Rick, you want the screen share back?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And let's see. So I want to share. And go back to this. And we'll go into weather forecasting. So when I did this 10 years ago, and 10 years ago, I mean, I've always been interested in the weather. So I was a bit obsessive about working out the forecast. I had, forecast models in front of me and soundings and all kinds of stuff. And it was, fun to be the weather guesser. But to be perfectly honest, the current tools we have available um, are so much better that I've just gotten old and lazy. And so we'll talk about those tools and just how incredibly impressive they are. But first, we'll talk about what is it that we want out of the weather. For again, this is targeted for your first long flights. You're of course looking for strong lift, high cloud bases. 7/8 cloud cover is what I like. You stay away from any overdevelopment. The clouds are generally honest. That sort of goes to the next one. Low relative humidity at cloud base. You don't want towering cumulus. You don't want spread out. And if the clouds are not all that thick, then generally, if they're there, they're working. If you've got a day when the relative humidity at cloud base is fairly high, then the clouds are not evaporating very quickly. They can stop working. They still look good, but you get there and it's not going the direction you want. Light winds, we got a fairly big discussion last time about winds and going upwind and downwind. The best solution is light wind. So if the winds are light, it's not a big deal going upwind. It's not a big deal going downwind. There's an interesting thing that happens when the winds are too light, because the thermals like to be organized with a little bit of wind. And when it gets really, really still, I get excited about not having to battle winds in any direction. But the thermals sometimes tend to be disorganized. It's sort of like looking down into a pot of boiling water. They'll come up and then they'll just sort of go off someplace, or they'll start another direction, and it can be frustrating. It's you sort of expect that more from a high wind day when you have a high what is it, lift to shear ratio, but it actually happens when it's really calm as well. And so a little bit of wind is good. No wave, I should have underlined that. Wave sink is nasty, persistent stuff. It's not that you're going to do your first cross countries actually in the wave. So generally wave around means you have to be extra cautious for a strong sink. No cirrus. The CI, blocks the insolation. Insolation is the right term, the amount of solar energy that hits the ground. So things get softer and the lift is not as good. No overdevelopment, having the sky suddenly look too good will often put you on the ground where you don't want to be, and no precipitation. So what can we live with? Okay lift, again, on your first few flights, if you got 3 knots, that's plenty good enough to cover ground. If you're struggling around in a knot and a half, and sort of means that's the best you can count on up ahead, wait for a better day. You don't really want to be doing this all in marginal conditions. However, knot and a half is a great day to fly around Sterling to get some practice. And so do that. Medium cloud bases, so 5K, I'm a big proponent to the get high, stay high, and to me, high starts around 5K. You can do it in less, but that's where I would like it. You can fly in the blue. It's not quite as certain, but there are good rules about flying in the blue, and that's one of those is looking for blue streets. If you get up in a blue thermal, you get near the top, head out into the wind, assuming that's the direction you want to go, or down or directly downwind. And again, in some wind, the lift tends to organize along the wind. And up to half cloud is also fine. You just want to, that's starting to get close to possibly overdeveloping. Oops. Medium winds, 15 knots or lower. I wouldn't do it above that. You've got 2 things against you. If you are gonna try to come back in the wind, it's gonna be very hard to make upwind progress. People talk about the penetration of gliders. The penetration of the 126 is, non-existent. The penetration of the B4 is not great. More modern gliders and heavier gliders tend to penetrate better, but I'd stay away from winds over 15, and that's talking about in the boundary layer at altitude. Wave if we're wary. So there can be some wave around. Just keep in mind that wave lift and its associated sink tend to organize across the wind. So if you find yourself in persistent sink, be aware that the quickest way out may be downwind. If you're flying in wave, the rule is to try to go upwind, because you'll cover so much ground downwind, but that's a high wind situation. So, but don't keep plowing along across the wind if you find yourself in heavy sink. And that's a sort of a general rule anyway. Don't keep, if you're going and you're going and you're going and the sink is bad, change direction to try to get out of it. Wave actually is organized in the direction of the terrain that's producing it, but typically you don't get good wave unless the wind is perpendicular-ish to the terrain. So the CI, if you start to get cirrus coverage, it doesn't hurt too badly if the convection's been established. So, if you're up in the morning and 9 o'clock and there's starting to be cirrus and it's starting to get thicker, then the day may not develop. But if the first cirrus you see is at 2 o'clock and the thermals are cranking, it doesn't damp them out overly quickly unless it's really heavy. And if you see it really starting to, so to speak, cast a shadow on the ground, um, it won't be a shadow, but you're obviously seeing the ground get darker, then be aware that, the lift is going to shut off. But if it's still fairly thin and it's well developed, it's not as bad as I think it is. I don't like cirrus. Spotty overdevelopment can be almost entertaining, where you run for the sun. So you're looking on the ground, you realize you're getting under a big dark patch. It makes all kinds of sense to make a big diversion to keep yourself in the sun. And really the place you want to be is with as much sun upwind as possible, so that air has had a chance to go over warm ground. But if you just sort of hang in place, it's one of the advantages of having some cross-country experience is, you'll be flying around your home airport and it starts to overdevelop over the airport. It's going to cycle, you're going to land. Whereas if we'll pretend that Fitchburg is open, if Fitchburg's in the sun, you can run over there and this whole thing will cycle out and keep you from having to land. And precipitation, if you stay away, I've had some very interesting flights at Mifflin during contests and not, where there's spotty showers, and it's kind of fun to try to figure out how you're going to navigate around them and avoid them, and things could work out fine if it's just kind of a springtime overdevelopment shower. So be aware that you can stay away from those. This is just going to cover some quick basics. High pressure generally means the ceilings are lower, ceilings being top of lift, and in general it's more stable. We actually look for more stability for wave, but in convection, high pressure can push it down. Low pressure basically makes the air go up easier, and quite often to a fault, which develops into rain or thunderstorms. A high to low is generally where you see the cirrus come in. So you've been flying under sunny high pressure area, low pressure's coming. It's often preceded by this very high cloud cover. Low to high is typically a cold front passage for us, and we love it. Winds turn into the northwest, and it gets snappy and all is good. So we're looking for that. And light winds in the spring can lead to a sea breeze. Roy talked about it. It's fascinating when it happens. Steve Wadakidis and I flew a fascinating sea breeze front that made it all the way to Sterling. And it looked like a straight vertical wall of cloud that started at about 3,000 feet and went to 5,000 feet, and you could run back and forth on this thing like it was a ridge. It's a bit of an advanced condition, and as we were talking about before, you don't want to get on the wrong side of it. I picked up Doug Jacobs in a field in Rhode Island one time because he got on the wrong side of a sea breeze. So here's another kind of basic prog chart and the kinds of things I'm looking for. The upper right-hand quadrant of a large high. So here in New England, we've got northwest winds coming in along these isobars, big high here. That's a typical cold front passage, the wind direction that we want. And so the day after a cold front is usually good. In the springtime, you often get two really good days. And the first one might be a little bit on the windy side, but that's really what I'm looking at from a overly simplistic way. And then as the high approaches, the northwest winds will start to abate and get us into those kind of ideal conditions of 10, 15 mile an hour northwest winds, lifts organized well, and a great day to go fly. So here's the spoiler that's taken all my fun of forecasting away. It's SkySight. I use it almost exclusively now. It's I think, the best option around. It's not free. It has some cost associated with it. It's currently supported. The developer is a soaring pilot and a very talented web developer. He's really serious about it. It is his business. He's got a small development team, and they're constantly adding new stuff. It started out a little rough, but lately it's been uncanny accuracy. Cloud bases are always tough to predict, and he underestimated it for last Tuesday. We had cloud bases up north that went to 10,000 feet. He'd forecasted 7, but where the clouds were and the amount of cloud cover was spot on. It's really pretty impressive. He's got some very interesting wave prediction tools. I'm not completely convinced that the positional accuracy is there, and I think they're a little under predicted in terms of strength, but it's wonderful to have a wave prediction tool. In the old days, we used to use a wave site, prediction site that was sponsored by the Navy, of all things. I don't really know why they were interested in it, but that was a tool that we had used in the past. But SkySight has some really impressive wave tools. This link to their tutorial, or you can go, I think, right to the skysite.io site and link to tutorials, and they're very well presented, and it's a pretty impressive array of features. I went to see Matt at the SSA convention. He gave a talk there, and one of the most fascinating things I found was that in Europe there's a tracking network that's based on FLARM, where they can basically real time see almost all the flights that are going on in Europe at any one time. And Matt has tapped into this as a feedback mechanism to test their accuracy. So when they've predicted, a cloud base, he can cross-check that with the data that they get from this real-time tracking network and see where people are topping out their climbs. And there's a number of other things they can get, true wind from these traces. And so I thought that was particularly clever to use a real-time feedback mechanism to test their accuracy. These are some examples of just sort of how, again, in the past, we really didn't have much that was soaring specific. So trying to figure out how strong the thermals were or something like that was tricky. Dr. Jack changed that with the blip maps, which are wonderful tools, and I'm actually going to use them in this presentation. But as a sort of example of specifically how good this has gotten, this is a prediction of cross-country distance potential for a day. And so this particular day is saying you could do 750K if you just loop back and forth right here. It's actually a very simple algorithm. They try to predict what this potential speed can be, and they just kind of add up the miles over the course of the day. But it is a wonderful thing to look and say, well, where is it that I want to fly today? And this one I think is fascinating. You pick a spot for a day, and it figured out this triangle as being the optimum place to do what they called a small triangle. It's about 300K, and in order to optimize your speed. Whether or not this is all that accurate, it's one thing, but again, it's just an example of some really advanced, very soaring specific tools that are available. This bit of the forecast, I think, is wonderful. This was a forecast of flying this triangle, given these start times, which you can pick the optimum start time for speed. What was it like that you were flying under? And sometimes there'll be places where there's no cloud, so you're going to cross a blue section. How close are you to cloud base? What's like I said, just very, very specific to us. We're really lucky to have such tools. So here's the blip maps. This comes from my presentation last time. Um, it is soaring metrics for soaring pilots. It is no longer being supported, but you certainly can still get them. It's being supported in the sense that people are maintaining the servers, but I don't believe there's any new development happening. But the development that's there is certainly what you need for the basics, and it's free. Um, so this is more what I look at when I'm trying to decide what the day is going to be. So the first thing is, how strong are the thermals going to be? This is thermal updraft velocity, and everything that I'm talking about here is also available in SkySight. Um, it's the average of the thermal upstrength. So we typically get this kind of climb. This is predicting, say, a 5-knot climb around here. We will typically see 5 knots or maybe even better, because what we're trying to do is fly from atmospheric anomaly to atmospheric anomaly. So we're looking for the strongest thermals, and we're trying to stay out of the weaker ones. So we often get what's predicted. Uh, this is the depth of the boundary layer, or better said, the top of the usable lift. And so, you know, you look at this and you say, oh, wow, you know, here's a 8,000 foot top of lift. But be aware that that may be bound by cloud base. So, you know, you look at this and you get real excited, but the really important thing is to go back and look at cloud base. And the difference between this and cloud base will give you the idea, some semblance of the thickness of the clouds. SkySight actually has specifically the cloud thickness, which is helpful to know if it's towering or if it's more likely to overdevelop. And so here's cloud base. I don't know if these were the same, Tuesday the 20th. Yes, so here we can see that the cloud base in our area is much lower than the top of lift. So this was a day that, you know, the clouds really kind of blew up, but it was going to be bound low, and we may not be able to, may not be such a good day after all. Got all excited about looking at the top of lift. This also includes the potential of clouds. So as the, you know, the gray areas are blue, they have no cloud cover, and it gives you some idea of how likely it is. It's not that accurate. It's tough to predict cloud base accurately, because it often depends on the specific moisture of the ground below. And in blip maps, you can choose which model it's based on. One is too dry, and one, or at least used to be, one is too dry always, and one is too wet always. So I used to look at the two models and try to figure out sort of halfway in between. And here's the wind. So this is the boundary layer wind. SkySight will give you surface, lower part of the boundary layer, middle part of the boundary layer, and top of the boundary layer. You can also just dial up the upper level winds at any altitude you want. And this, of course, is important to know. Are we battling a big wind, or are we, do we have a reasonable condition to fly in? It's not a great wave predictor, because these are boundary layer winds, and generally for wave you want to know winds that are above the boundary layer. And buoyancy to shear, that's the one I was looking for before, is a blip that tries to tell you how much the thermals are torn up. It's not one I pay a lot of attention to, because generally if it's windy, you know, really windy, I'm not probably flying. Big exception to flying wave, of course, but in thermals, you can kind of tell how torn up it is by the strength of the wind. But what it's a ratio of is the strength of the thermals versus the strength of the wind. So if you've got, you know, really weak wind thermals and really strong winds, it's going to be a lousy buoyancy to shear, and you're not going to want to fly that day, but you really didn't need to express it as buoyancy to shear. You sort of intuitively know that. Overdevelopment potential is something I look at because, again, you've got, maybe good indications of what's going on, and then you find out, oh, there's potential for a lot of overdevelopment. Where that overdevelopment is going to happen is a good thing to help you steer away from it. Again, it's not always super accurate, but it's certainly generally a good indication. And it may be cycling, you may get through it, but watch out for areas that are predicted to overdevelop. This is a hyper local forecast. You can click on a blip map and get all of these various pieces of information. So if you're going to fly locally at Sterling, Ben, here's everything you'd ever want to know for one spot. But one of the big advantages to blip maps and SkySight is that it's giving you an indication of the weather in the area, so you can best pick places to fly and things that might be problematic. On a 50K flight, one of these is probably fine. So you can change the time for these. They're different times. SkySight will advance by a half an hour. So you can look for air mass changes. It's going to be great until 4:30, in this particular area. So you can plan accordingly. Or it's a lousy morning, but if I get out there at 2 o'clock, it's going to get a lot better. So that's good stuff. There's a convergence indicator. So the sea breeze that Roy talked about, you can see it on these blip maps, and you can see it on SkySight. You can advance the time, and you can watch it move inland as the time goes on. I used to live in or near Providence. Actually, in Providence is when I would see this, and I go out on my back porch, and I could see this, literally this 45-degree wedge of air, march into the north away from the south-facing coast and come back about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And, the marine air would be a different color than the rest of it. And it was fascinating to watch. We talked about buoyancy to shear. You can have different colors on each one of these maps. It's best to, fix them. There's a way you can do that. And you can launch a SKU-T for anywhere on the map. SKU-Ts, I believe Steve Pavola is going to do a webinar about how to read a SKU-T. And a SKU-T, once you know how to read it, really tells you everything there is to know about the air mass. And it's a great skill to have. We use it extensively for wave prediction. But it's really nice. It'll tell you all of these things. But again, with all these tools, to some extent, you don't need to. They are interpretations of a SKU-T for all intents and purposes. This is the procedure I used. Again, these are sort of, when you're looking at a general forecast, you can kind of see these general indications that things are coming your way. Cold front passage is always good. Sunny to mostly sunny. Look out for partly sunny, because partly sunny sometimes means partly sunny from cirrus. They don't differentiate partly sunny great soaring clouds from partly sunny high overhead clouds. And a large diurnal swing, which means cold at night and really warm in the daytime, that big swing, the cold at night is kind of giving you the dew point, because the cold won't get any colder than the temperature that the air starts to condense. And so that gives you an indication that cloud bases could be high. But as we'll sometimes, and actually unfortunately more times than not, that quote cloud base is so high it ends up above an inversion and you end up with a blue day. So you get all excited about a big diurnal swing, only to find out that the top of the lift is low and it's blue. So this I found as a replacement for the tool that I use for medium and long range forecast models. I used to use a Unisys site, and I think George Young told me it was gone, and I'm still mourning its absence, but this seemed to work for me. And from these kind of models, you can look a long ways out for what it's worth. You know, you can get a 10-day look. Don't bank on it, but sometimes it's fun to watch the weather come or watch the accuracy change. And so you can get precipitation and wind direction and strength, et cetera, et cetera. This tool here, the National Weather Service forecast discussions, is a really useful tool because this is forecasters talking to forecasters, but it gives you the real synopsis of what's happening to the air mass, you know. So they'll talk about, you know, this particular system is coming in and what they expect to see and how long it's going to last. And it doesn't look out too terribly far, but within a couple of days, it's very useful information. And it is somewhat forecast speak, but it's not, you know, all abbreviations. This is the site, the FSL site is what I use for soundings. It's an interactive map. You can sort of click on it and you'll see where the clouds will happen, where the top of thermals will happen, how stable is it up above for a wave. Here's the wind profile here where you can see how the wind changes with altitude. You know, this is a great cross-section of the atmosphere if you want to spend time looking at it. And of course the blips. And then this is something, you know, replace everything on here by I look at, you can replace all of this with I look at SkySight, I look at SkySight, I look at SkySight. But really the one thing that I find helpful along with SkySight is these forecast discussions, because it really gives you a sense of what's the general atmosphere is doing. And here's the URLs for those. Don't be writing them down. You'll be able to get them off the slides. And I believe we are good. To hand it back over to Roy.
Okay.
Speak,
All right.
Roy.
If I can, let me make there's a couple of comments about weather.
Oh yeah, actually, I wanted to make the comment you're about to make, so go ahead and make it.
Okay, what's the comment I'm about to make?
Most people look at the weather to figure out why not to fly.
Yeah. First of all, there's three simple things I want to say. Number one, if you're inclined to subscribe to SkySight, I think that if you do it through the Cumulus Soaring supply company, they have a special code that you get 15 months for the price of 12 if you do it that way. So that's worth exploring. That's my first point. My second point is to say, one of the things I find fascinating about gliding is that although, as Rick pointed out, the weather tools that we have today are so much better than we had 10 or 12 or 15 years ago. And yet, in New England, there are no new records. And the point Rick just made is accurate. People tend to use the weather to tell them when not to fly. You know, it's a weekend and I can only take one day away from the family. Which day is going to look better? They use the weather for that reason. I say this with all humility. Of your entire instructor staff, of your entire group of private owners, I probably know less about weather than anybody. I'm not really interested in it. I check a few basic things, you know, when I'm going to go fly. But somehow I managed to fly 25,000 kilometers every year. And my point is simply this. This is a beginning basic program. Don't worry if you don't understand everything you just heard. I don't understand it all. But what matters is that you go out and fly. That's what matters. And particularly that you learn to fly in difficult conditions. You learn to fly on the less than optimum days. And fundamentally, that what you do every time is you set a task for yourself. Instead of just going in the areas where the best clouds are and the best lift are, and some guy or gal on the radio said it's really good out here. Set a task, execute the task. That's the way that you're going to learn. Okay, that was my comments about weather, which is not to undercut what Rick said, but don't, you know, we did some pretty good flights back in the day when there was nothing more available in New England than a T5 or SQT chart that was built off the Albany sounding, because Albany was the only place that sent up a weather balloon. So if the wind was blowing from Albany and the SQT chart looked pretty good at Albany, it was time to go fly. That's how we used to do it. Okay, now we're going to start talking about off-field landing, the dreaded off-field landings. Let me see, Rick, are you out of screen sharing now?
I am. You should be able to do it.
All right, so do you see Taunton Airport again now?
I do.
Excellent. All right, we're doing good. I'm going to go to here and make it full from here. And we're going to talk about off-field landings. Now, I'm going to preface this with a couple of things that are really important to understand. You're going to see some aerial photographs of fields, followed by some ground photographs of the same fields. But a lot of these photographs were taken 10 years ago and no longer reflect the way the fields look, or in some cases, whether the fields even exist anymore. We're not trying to show you where the landable fields are. I may mention a few if the pictures are current. What I'm trying to do, and we're trying to do, is to help you see something from the air, recognize problems, plan an approach and landing to that field, and deal with the problems on the way in. So I firmly expect that somebody is going to say to me at the airfield, "Hey, Roy, where is that field?" And I'm probably not going to tell you because, number one, it may not exist anymore. And number two, I want you to go find your own fields. And hopefully all I can do is teach you how to do it. Let's talk about field size. The size of the field that you want depends on a lot of things. Your own personal skill level, the direction of the wind, and the height of the obstructions. As a general rule, you want to land into the wind, but the height of the obstructions as you come into the field generally reduce the touchdown area by a factor of 10 to 1. Meaning if there is a 40-foot tree at the edge of the field, you're going to lose the first 400 feet of that field. You can't get down that quick. With that said, if there are little or no obstructions, the minimum size of the field is about 600 feet. Well, that's about 6 telephone lengths to measure by from the air. You can look sometimes at the telephone poles, and if you can count 6 spaces between the poles, you know that you've got about 600 feet. That's an adequate field if you're going into the wind, if the field is level, and there are minimal obstructions. The ideal field is into the wind, no obstructions, with an approach over water or marsh and slightly uphill. Burn into your mind as you're picking fields the following phrase: over the water and into the field. Over the water and into the field. Never land towards water. because the field is going to slope or drain towards that water, and you want to land uphill. So if you've got a good field set up, your approach should be over water, and we're going to see that in several of the fields that we're going to look at. From the air, the field should look reasonably smooth, uniform color. It shouldn't be blotchy. Blotchiness usually means fairly high bushes, and there should be no unexplained mowing lines. In other words, if you see the field and it looks great, except half of it is mowed, do not land across the area where the mowing line is. In other words, don't land going from the mowed area to the unmowed or the unmowed to the mowed. Why? Because the farmer probably stopped mowing at a barbed wire fence that you can't see from the air. Barbed wire fences are almost impossible to see until you're right on top of them, but don't worry, we're going to talk later on about how to deal with them. This is a field that you probably know about. It is located about 3 or 4 kilometers to the immediate west of Sterling. It's called Mason Farm. The good news is you own it. It's owned by the water quality people. I think it's the Department of Environmental Quality Assurance or something like that. These are the people who take care of the drinking water that's in the Wachusett Reservoir. And they bought this farm because this swale that you see right here collected, no polite way to say it, cow poop that went down into the Stillwater River, that went into the Wachusett Reservoir and into the Boston drinking supply. So they bought the farm, literally, and turned it into nothing more than a hay operation. And it is a really nice field for landing. It's certainly big enough. And it's pretty uniformly flat. It does rise probably about 40 feet from here up to here. And we're going to look at a couple of different views. But this is what it looks like from the air. And its elevation is probably about 250 feet higher than Sterling. The first photo you're going to see is from somebody standing here and looking this way. And then the second photo you're going to see is from somebody here and looking this way. Both areas are certainly adequate for landing. So let's take a look at our first ground photo. Again, just to go back, this is the view from that corner looking here. This is a pretty easy field to get into. It's certainly big enough. A pattern approach here and coming in for landing is going to be fine. Notice that the field is flatter, closer to the road. We're going to talk about this later and see it in almost all of the fields that we look at. The best place to land in the field is usually the segment closest to the road. And notice that the field does slope again down towards the wet area and over into this area here. So just to help you, once again, what the view that you just saw was looking out this way. The next view we're going to see is this way here. Now this, by the way, is an adequate field to land in, particularly because it's uphill. So imagine this field wasn't here, you just had this field. It would be fairly easy to do a pattern, come in over these trees, and then get everything open, come down and land here. Let's take a look at what that looks like from the ground. And you can see it's a pretty good looking field. But again, notice this phenomena that we're going to see over and over again. And that is the best part, the flattest part of the field, is the area that's near the road. I can't tell you why that is, except I suspect that, way back in the dark ages, when they laid out these cart paths that became roads, they picked the smoothest part of the terrain. Also, remember my rule about, field has to be 6 telephone poles. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's a pretty good field. And again, this is what you would look for, and just an easy, nice field to land in. Let's see what's coming up next. For your approach to the field, you want to keep a reasonable distance from the field and avoid the circle and land mistake. That's another way of saying that your pattern in approach and landing into the farm field shouldn't be dramatically different than your pattern approach and landing at the airport in Sterling. One of the problems that happens, and it happens to everybody, is on your first few off-field landings, you get scared a little bit and you fly right over the airfield. You fly right over the airfield because you want to stay close to it. There are a bunch of problems with that, but the most important one is that once you fly right over it, you can't see it. It's under you and it's behind you. A famous glider builder named Dick Spreeder once remarked that the most difficult maneuver to accomplish in a glider is to land on a spot 200 feet directly below you. It's extraordinarily difficult to do it because you can't see where you want to land. So you've got to get away from the field and fly a normal pattern. And a normal pattern, I mean a fairly distinct downwind leg, a well-defined base leg, and a fairly long final. The long final is important because that's how you learn to control your airspeed. So, and the long final gives you time to make the adjustment with the spoilers. You've got to keep your airspeed low because the addition of extra airspeed, I mean, 10 miles an hour of extra airspeed is going to increase your energy and a land out roll by about 500 feet. So this is a place for constant, disciplined airspeed. It's not the place for, I'm going to add 10 knots for safety. This is the place where, damn it, I'm going to do it with precision and I'm going to do it excellently. And that's your final approach into the field. Again, as we just noticed, if all factors are equal, land parallel and closer to the road. It's probably going to be smoother, probably going to make your retrieve a little bit easier too. Touchdown with minimum airspeed and stop immediately. This is not the place to taxi along and do anything other than get on the wheel brake and get the glider stopped. There are going to be chuck holes, potholes, field mice holes, boulders, and all kinds of stuff in that field. It's not an airport. And you should, your basic rule is, I'm not going to roll 1 foot longer than I need to. That's part of protecting the glider. When I fly in Africa, we have a problem with anthills. Anthills are about the size of a fire hydrant and about the same consistency. And between the meerkat holes and the anthills, if we wind up in one of those fields, rule is stop right now. A little bit about field selection. In New England, low hay and clover are generally the best. And you'll see a lot of low hay and clover around. And the worst thing is high corn. We don't usually get into high corn in New England until probably the middle of the summer, certainly late June, early July. And most of the corn that you see in New England is going to be farmers growing silage for dairy farms. And high corn needs to be avoided. It's going to do some damage to the glider. It's going to do some damage probably to the farmer's field, farmer's crop too. So you want low hay, you want clover. Watch out for unexplained mowing patterns or color change lines. There's something down there, and again, it may well be a barbed wire fence that you're not seeing. that explains why that color changes there. Uphill, it should be obvious. Uphill is okay, downhill is not, although in a few minutes we're going to see a field where into the wind and slightly downhill was a little bit better than going downwind and up the hill. Remember always over the water and into the field. The field will slope towards the water, and you want to make your approach always over the water and into the field and never the reverse. Okay. This is a field that by and large doesn't much exist anymore. To help you orient yourself, this is Solomon Pond Mall. And this is route, I think this is route 290 here. This is the exit off of 290. If you're familiar with Solomon Pond Mall, you turn right in here and go by a motel, I think it was a Motel 8 or something like that. And I got interested in these fields a while back to see if they were landable. And at that time they were. And the two ways to look at them would have been coming this way, over the wet area and into this field, or this way here, again, just touching down afterwards. Today, this field largely doesn't exist. There's a hotel here. This area is still there, but this area here is all residential now. But let's take a look and see what they look like from the ground. Now visualize yourself, you're flying here, and how are you going to set up a pattern? Let's decide, assume the wind is going this way, and we're going to land this way. So we're going to set up a base leg out here, give ourselves plenty of time to get our airspeed under control, slow down, we're going to go real slow over here and touch down here. Let's see what it looks like. That's what this looks like. Coming in here, the broad area that we just saw is up in here. We would have to scoot over this little swale that's right there, but this is not unmanageable in a 126, a 134, B4, and it's certainly manageable in a flap glider. Again, if we counted the telephone poles, we'd see that there's about 6 or 8 here. Let me just go back one so you can understand the other orientation. Now we're going to take a look at what it looks like this way here. And that's right here. And again, this field here is probably large enough where you could jump over that and land in this field here. Again, counting the telephone poles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's about an 800-foot field. Again, I just use this to show what's possible and how to set up a pattern into it. This field today essentially doesn't exist except the area that's over here, and it should only be used in an emergency. Let's see what we got. This is a field that is actually very close to Sterling. This is the Wachusett Reservoir here. Sterling is up in here, about 5 miles away. This is the Wachusett Country Club in West Boylston. This is Prescott Street. And the golf course is on both sides. This field, if you look at it, let's take a look at it, okay? It has a slight slope from here down to here. And if there were high trees up in this area from here, this field would be extraordinarily difficult. But it's fairly low as it sits here now. So I threw out 2 different patterns. This would be a simple right-hand pattern, base leg here, landing uphill, and you touch down here. And this would be ideal if the wind was coming this way. But the wind almost never is. The wind in this area is usually from the west or the northwest. So I also drew a pattern which brought us across the field on a downwind into here. Now, let me show you what it starts to look like as we start to fly that pattern. This is a viewpoint sort of on the crosswind here. You can see the field. The field looks fairly short, and you can see why it would be better to come in a little bit this way. But the truth is, you don't really have a bad approach here, and you'll see that in a little bit. Later on, I'm going to caution you about crossing a road into a field. I'm going to tell you to never cross a road into a field because of the power lines along the road that you won't see. So you're going to say, hey, wait a second, Roy, you've got us crossing a road over here. The reason I've got you crossing a road over there is it's not a road. It is a golf cart path. And so when you get to it, you'll see it actually looks fun. Here again, you can count our telephone poles: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's you know, it's a 900-foot field. So here, and this is our approach on base leg coming in and landing this way. And again, you can see that's not a road, that is a golf cart path that goes down to this hole. You've got a pretty good approach to get down here, and your only obstacle is going to be this rock wall. You know, not going to be that difficult to land here. If you wanted, you could come over this way and give yourself a little extra space going diagonally across the field. But it's a suitable field, probably at the minimum in this direction, the minimum that a new pilot should handle. But again, if you give yourselves a long final, slow it down, and just skim over the top of that rock wall, you're going to be fine. Now let's take a look and see what this field looked like at this time from different directions. First view you're going to see, I think, is from here down this way. The second view you're going to see is this way along the rock wall. Oh, I got one more picture here, sorry. This is sort of like a very, very high final. So that's from that corner looking down the field. This is the view now turning right along the rock wall here. So you would come in this way, landing that way. And from the far end looking back, you can see this down, it does slope, but it's not really that bad. Now, the bad news is today this field has been overgrown and it all looks like this scrub. But you know, even flying local at Sterling, you can go and look at it. But what I invite you to do when you go look at it, hang on, it's the wrong field, is I want you to look at this field, which is one block down and actually bigger. And if you want tonight, when we're done, you want to go on Google Earth, you can find these fields. You're also going to see this field here. It's a pretty big field, actually a little bit bigger than this one. So next time you're at Sterling, you go and take a look at these fields, then get in the car and go take a look at them. It's only a 5-mile drive away. All right. This is another field. You saw it briefly last night, on Tuesday night, when we were taking our tour to Danielson. It has a name. It's called Alta Vista Farm. It is in the town of Rutland, although frankly, the boundary line between the towns of Holden and Rutland is exactly right here. So this is also a somewhat landable farm. This is called Lilac Hedge Farm, but it's not even in nowhere near as nice as this. This field is wonderful for several reasons. Number one, it's a fairly good slope uphill. It drops off dramatically on the side away from the road, but it's plenty wide. It's got a really nice approach into it. And it honestly doesn't get any easier. This is a 2,000-foot long field from here to here. And again, very easy to come in, do a pattern approach from far away and touch down in this field. In this area, in the frontal area of the field, where the hill is steepest, if you look down, you were going to see these posts or poles that we talked about with Norfolk Airport. And again, those are bird feeders that are put in by the Audubon Society, but there are none of them up here. And it's just a great field to land in. And it has unfenced, it has easy access from the road. So let's take a look at what it looks like. First, from a photograph looking this way, and then a photograph looking that way. Oh, sorry, one more photo. Photograph will be here and here. By the way, if you want to find this field on Google Earth, this is called the Pine Hill Reservoir. And again, remember my idea about over the water into the field. And that's what it looks like from that probably touchdown point. It's a really nice field. And this photograph is recent. I took this photograph last Sunday and actually went out in preparation for this program to look at some of these places just to make sure that I wasn't sending you out to some place with dragons and orcs. This is the view from the approach. The Pine Hill Reservoir would be over here. You can see it does roll and dip down in the threshold of the field, but you're going to be landing up here. This is a really nice field. All right, we talked earlier about landing across a road, and it's a hazard, and it's a hazard for several reasons. Mostly because as you're looking down at the ground and you're looking down at the pavement, there are going to be telephone wires that you're just not going to be able to see. From the air, you can't look down at telephone poles and telephone wires against a black background and see them. Try it the next time you fly. You just look down and you're going to say, hey, wait a second. I can't see anything at all. It also reduces the usable field length because you need to stay high and clear the telephone poles. If, however, you must do it, and there are times when you have to do it, try to get your flight path over a pole. In other words, go over the telephone post. Do not go between it. And the reason is because the wires can't be any higher than the telephone post. Think about it. They may droop down between the two posts, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in a minute. But the wires can't be taller than the telephone pole. So your approach across a road, if you must do it, I don't recommend that you do it, it should be crossing over the telephone pole. This is going to be an example here of photo. We're going to look at this field in several different ways, but let's imagine our final approaches into this. This, by the way, is a high school athletic field. It's the Clinton High School field. And we'll talk about schoolyards in a few minutes. But imagine we're coming across here. Let's take another look. You have an approach over this road. Now, I just told you there are going to be wires that you can't see. Let's look at the next picture. This is that road that you just saw, and there are the wires. Let me just go back so that you understand what we looked at. These two cars are parked here and here. So Now you got to come in over this field. And remember, this is something that's important. We'll emphasize in a minute. See these thick wires. You might see the thick wires, but you might not see the thin ones up here. You have to go over the pole. This is another view. Again, notice along that road here, the same thing, wires all around. We'll go back to this field in a little bit because we're going to talk about landing in schoolyards in a few minutes. High power lines. These are all over New England. They're everywhere, and frequently they're near the good fields because the power transmission companies wanted to put their lines through farmland because it was cheaper for them than having to go through cities and towns where they had to tear up buildings in order to put the stanchions. The problem with high power lines is that the wires droop between the pylons, and there's an illusion that you can fly between the pylons in the area where the wires are drooping and get a little lower. Simply put, that will get you killed. And the reason for that has to do that there are thin wires that extend from the tops of the pylons that you're not going to be able to see. The purpose of those thin wires is to act as lightning arresters. If lightning hits the field of pylons, they don't carry electricity and they're very thin. Of course, we're going to never fly under wires. That's just a recipe for disaster. You can't possibly judge the height of your fin. Nobody's good enough to do that, and that's another recipe for disaster. Let's look at some pictures. These are typical high power lines, and you see the big looping arc here. All right, this is the high tension line itself. This is what you see from the air. You can see these at Sterling over by the reservoir, and because they droop down, you know, the temptation is to fly through here because you get a little lower. But let's look at the next picture. You see up here the very, very thin lightning arresting wire. And if you go between them, you're never going to see it until it rips your tail off. Same rule as the telephone poles. If you must cross high power lines, go over the pylon. The lightning arresting wire can't be taller than the pylon. So your approach is going to be over the pylon and into the field. These kind of high power lines are all over New England. They're also all over the Alps. And when I flew at St. Aubin, they drilled this into us in the pilot briefings almost every day, to always fly over the pylon and never between them. Schoolyards. This is something that's changed dramatically in the age of post-September 11th and sadly some of the school violence. My first 2, maybe 3 landouts were in schoolyards. One in Framingham and a couple in Cape Cod. But I don't think I'd do it anymore. There's too much going on in the schoolyard itself and too much in terms of police involvement and publicity. Post-September 11th and school incidents, it's just not a smart thing to do. It's guaranteed to get the police and the FAA involved. It's guaranteed to get you in the news that night. You know, idiot glider pilot landed in schoolyard, narrowly avoiding recess and killing all the kids, or some nonsense like that. You know, again, like I said, not never, but I would not do it if I had any reasonable alternative. Let's take a look at a schoolyard to see why. Remember, we talked about this field before. This is the town of Clinton High School. It's quite close to Sterling. This is the Wachusett Reservoir. And this was the road that we flew over before. And let's take a little look as we get closer. Anybody want to try and set up a landing through these guys coming this way? Or these guys? So there's a little bit too much going on in schoolyards. Again, I have landed in them in my career, but I haven't done it in the last 25 years, and I strongly advise avoiding it. The only good thing about them is you can usually be sure that the field is going to be nice and smooth, but you can also be sure that you're going to be reading about yourself in the newspaper tonight. Last thing I'm going to talk about before we finish is some special problems that you can encounter in off-field landing. The first one is you get on final and you realize that the field is wavy or it rolls. When you see that, don't panic. Just get the glider slowed down and try and phase your landing so that you are on an uphill section before the crest of the field. And as soon as you touch down, full dive brake, stick forward so that you ride over the top of the crest and down the backside. This is another area where airspeed discipline is just going to be essential. Another problem is steep hills. It's possible to land on a very steep hill. If possible, and remember your speed is going to dissipate very quickly, try to turn the glider 90 degrees so that it doesn't roll backwards. If you can't do that, and you're trying to figure out how to get out of the glider and keep the wheel brake on at the same time, one helpful hint is to take your dress belt off your pants and wrap it around either the handbrake if it's on the stick, or wrap it around the spoiler handle if the wheel brake is connected there. There are lots of handy things you can do with the dress belt to keep the glider from rolling backwards. Then when you get out, you can then turn the glider 90 degrees and you can put your belt back on so your pants don't fall down when you meet the farmer. Another problem, barbed wire fences. These are extraordinarily difficult to see from the air, although a telltale sign is an unexplained mowing pattern. And that usually means the farmer stopped mowing at the edge of the fence. If you are heading for a barbed wire fence and you're not going to get it stopped, aim the nose of the glider at the fence post. The purpose of that is to knock the fence post down so that you can roll over the post and the wire. Do not go between the posts. If you do that, the barbed wire is going to slice through your canopy. And you can think about the next thing it's going to slice through after it goes through the canopy. So again, for barbed wire fences, if you see one at the last minute, head at the post and try to knock the post down. You're going to do a little damage to the glider's nose, but not as much damage as you're going to do to the canopy and to your face if you go rolling through a piece of barbed wire. Tall grass. This is actually something that's encountered fairly frequently. It is important here to keep the wings exactly level. And remember that the glider is going to stop immediately. The last thing you should do before, as you're in the pattern and getting ready for the field landing, you get the gear down, you get ready to go, is you should cinch up your seat belt and particularly your shoulder belts right away if you wind up going into tall grass. One of the ways that you can see tall grass from the air is if you see a wave pattern in the grass with the wind. That's going to be a dead giveaway that you probably got something between 12 and 18 inches of grass. The reason to keep the wings level is because the grass will stop whatever hits it first fast, and if it stops a wingtip, because the wings aren't level, the glider is going to ground loop and possibly cartwheel into the field. There have been accidents that have occurred that way, and it's real important to keep the wings level. There are other special problems. Some of them develop after you land. Frequently, cell phone coverage doesn't work in some places, maybe because it's a valley or something like that. But usually you'll find that text and SMS messages to your crew do work, even if your cell phone doesn't work. One of the neat things and a very effective things to do if you have good cell phone coverage and you need to get the address where you landed out, is to take a picture of the mailbox. In most parts of the country, people's addresses are on their mailboxes. This is an actual picture that I took of a land out in Ontario and sent to my crew so they'd know where to go. They put this address into the GPS and they were there in 2 hours. It's a pretty neat trick, and you haven't got a whole lot to do for the next 2 hours anyway. So because you're going to have plenty of time, scout out the best access to the field. Figure out how, when your crew gets there, they're going to get the trailer, or you're going to get the trailer to the glider, or the glider to the trailer. Scout it out and come up with the most effective way, always trying to do the minimum amount of damage to the farm field if possible. Particularly in the early phase, when you don't know what's going on after you land out, try to get yourself towards the road. And the reason is I've had the experience where my glider did no damage to a clover field, but a police cruiser that just went diagonally from the road directly at me, chopped up the whole field, doing way more damage than I ever did. And the same thing can happen if for some reason somebody calls a fire truck or an ambulance or something like that. So get to the side of the road, particularly if it looks like a delicate or valuable crop. Surprisingly, crop damage on land out is usually pretty rare. And frankly, in the last 15 years, when I've landed on farms, a frequent experience I have is that the farmers don't own the crops. You apologize and say, "Gee, I hope I didn't damage your crop," and they say, "Don't worry, I don't own it. It's not my crop. I lease the field to somebody else." So this is just part of the change in agriculture throughout the world, where big companies that can afford expensive equipment and can afford the best engineered seed corn and things like that will go out and lease up hundreds of farms and plant them and pay the farmers that way. So it's very, very common nowadays to find out that the farmer doesn't own the crop at all, and that usually lets them relax. In New England, you will sometimes see cornfields that the pig farms and the cow farms grow for silage to feed the animals, but usually we're not going to be landing in those kind of fields. Now, everything I've been trying to do has been to get you relaxed, but now I'm going to tease you a little bit, because you're in this program because you're worried about flying cross country, and you're worried about landing out, and you're worried about, can I get the glider into the field and something. And here's the thing that you didn't think to worry about. Where there is a farm, there is a guide dog. And he has been waiting his whole life. He lives for the moment when he can get to protect his farm, his pack, and his family. And you may be laughing, I hope you are, but I have to tell you, this has been the biggest problem that I've come to consistently in landing in farms. At least 4 or 5 times, I have stopped and landed in farm fields, and I'm met by him. And that's what they look like. So you see, you thought you thought that the only thing you had to worry about was picking a field and getting the glider in. Now you got to worry about this when you get there. But I'm half joking and half serious. It is not uncommon to come across a guard dog, and it is a good idea to familiarize yourself with how to deal with animals like this if they are roaming free on the farm, and they sometimes are. I've been helped by the fact that my daughter is a professional animal trainer, so she gives me all kinds of ideas. But a good rule of thumb, if you're faced with a guard dog and he or she is unleashed, is don't make any quick moves. Do not look the animal in the eye. Do not approach the animal. The animal will, and keep your mouth shut. If the animal sees your teeth, he's going to think that you're snarling at him. If he sees your eyes, he's going to interpret that as an aggressive response. If you go towards him, he's going to interpret that as an aggressive response. The good news is most of the time they make such a racket that the farmer comes and calls them off. Sometimes they just get used to you when they decide, okay, he's not looking at me, he's not aggressive, etc. But this is a problem that you have to worry about. All right, we're getting near the end here. A couple more things that I want to talk about. And one is land-out kits. What's in your land-out kit? You have a land-out kit. You should. Most every experienced pilot does. I've got different land-out kits depending for South Africa or flying in New England. But in my land-out kit, these are the essential items here. A cell phone charging cable and a charge pack. You know what I mean by the charge packs, where you have a spare battery, and even if your cell phone goes dead, you can recharge it and use it. That's essential. A pen and notepad. That's so that you can write down any notes that you need, names and addresses of witnesses, name and address of the farmer, so you can send them a thank you note or some flowers or something afterwards. Or if you have to leave the glider and go for a long walk to the road, which sometimes happens, then you leave a pen, you leave a note with the glider as to where you are and what you're doing. If your glider uses a TOS type European ring, you should have one in your kit. Why? Because if the farmer is going to help tow you out with a tow rope, particularly with a tractor or something like that, if the field is soft, you can't get a rope into the tow release. You have to have a ring to do it. So I always carry one in my flight kit, and I've used it several times as farmers have gotten four-wheel drive pickup trucks or tractors to help me pull out. Usually the farmers got rope. I mean, they are farmers, but you've got to have that ring with you. You want to have a flashlight or headlamp, particularly if you wind up on a late retrieve and you're taking the glider apart at night. You can have a handheld one. I like the one that straps over your head and shines the light so you can use your hands. You should have some amount of money, $20 or $30 cash in smaller bills, and that's to give a few dollars to the kids who might help you rig or de-rig or pull the glider away, or to go to the grocery store to get yourself a sandwich or something like that. Also, a small amount of insect repellent. You can get small containers of insect repellent at Eastern Mountain Sports or any of the Cabela's or the hiking stores or hunting stores or that sort of thing. And it's also good to have some aspirin or Tylenol. So I think these things are what I view as essential. Things that are convenient to have but probably not essential is one of those Leatherman multi-tools or a really good Swiss Army knife. Some sunscreen, particularly if you're light-skinned or have sensitive skin. Some energy bars if you get hungry. Butane lighter if you wind up in the middle of nowhere and you have to build a campfire. Normal glasses. You'd be amazed how many people land out. They're wearing their sunglasses and their regular glasses are in the car back at the airport. have your normal glasses with you because it's going to get dark. Also, if you have allergies, you want to have a few pills of your anti-allergy medications. And lastly, if you're really worried about the last screen, you can bring some dog snacks with you. And by the way, I do. So that's pretty much everything I've got to say. We're getting close to 9 o'clock, and I'm going to turn it back to Rick. My last thought to you is to remember not to worry about landing out. It does happen to everybody, including me. And the only thing I can say about this picture is trust me. When the wheel hit the ground, the sky did not look that good.
I was going to ask.
Okay. No, it didn't. The sky was totally overcast when the wheel hit the ground. Okay, Rick?
That's it for me. We would take any questions if anybody, if I can figure out how to get my chat up.
Yeah, do we want to, can we unmute everybody or what?
I think we'll end up with trouble with that like we did last time.
All right, let's see what we got in chat. I haven't seen any of the chat stuff.
Yeah, hasn't been much, and I don't see any now, but if there's any questions that show up here in a couple of minutes, we'll talk about it. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up. George?
Well, I see it now. You're all out there trying to find Alta Vista Farm, aren't you?
Yeah, well, George looked up about the Modsey Vale, and he said that the regulations are that you cannot be above the height of the TCA, as you called it, the Class B.
You can't be above the height of the adjacent airspace. It's something I learned in Kevin Harnett's ground school. And I sent you an email with a picture of from the FARs, so you can double check.
Yep.
It's probably
well, give us the value. What is the maximum height inside the Modsey Vale?
Well, the top of the Boston airspace is 7,000 feet, so you can't go above 7. So
if you're at 7,000 feet, you're going to Marston's Mills.
It's true, but it's practically not a problem. But we should be precise.
Yeah, good to know. Nope, I appreciate you.
Double check on that. I sent it to you. But Kevin Harnett had a ground school, and that's where I learned it. Okay.
Yeah, and let me talk a little bit. There's several. Everybody's talking about where's Alta Vista Farm. Go out and look at it. Every experienced glider pilot does this. We all go out. We look from the air down at fields. We make a mental note as to where they are, and then what we do is we go down and we look at them and we walk on them. And that's what I did on last Sunday. I went out and looked at the field, and then next season, go look at it again. And bear in mind that Alta Vista Farm may look really great right now, and it does. But there's a real good chance that in the middle of July, it's going to be full of those big white marshmallows, where they cut the hay and then they roll it up and they put it in white plastic wrap, and the place is unlandable. So you've got to keep an eye on that sort of thing, because they do change. They really do. I mean, I landed out once at I'm trying to remember the field that's in the valley to the east of Franconia, and it's a little private airstrip that's south of the Gap.
Bradley.
Bradley.
Yeah.
And I arrived at Bradley, and the guy was mowing the lawn right in the middle of the runway. Like, okay, what do I do now? The answer is you just hold until he's at one end, and then you go ahead and land. But fields do change, so you got to be careful with that.
So we have another question here. Could you talk about the legalities about landing out on private property, nature reserves, highways, etc.? Yeah.
Well, those
First
are
of
all
all,
different questions.
yeah.
Okay.
Start with highways. Don't do it.
Now let's start with private land. Okay. Your position always is always. I'm sorry, it was an emergency, and your field was the best available. That's what you say. What you do not say is, and I've been looking at this field for a year now and planning on landing in there. Okay, you do not do that. You do not go to the guy who owns, or the gal who owns Alta Vista Farm, and say, "Hey, your farm was, the highlight of the cross country show."
Yeah, Roy told me to do it.
It's always going to be that it was an emergency. Highways in New England, no. There are some parts of the country where landing on a road is appropriate. There are some places in the world, some places in South Africa where we do it, but not here. That's going to be a mess, and it could easily hurt somebody. Other places, it's the general rule is that you're not going to get in trouble, and you have insurance on the glider. If you do damage to somebody's property, you've got insured. If you hurt a person, you've got insurance. So that's why we buy insurance. So that's the best I can help you with.
Just to add a little comment, very often, you're briefed at a contest, and almost always it's recommended that you don't offer to pay for crop damage. You apologize for it, but don't set the precedent of, handing $100 bill out for crop damage, because you will set a precedent. So,
Well, yeah. I mean, I haven't had that issue come up. As I say, I can't tell you the last time I landed out and the farmer owned the crop. They usually say to me, "I don't care. It's not my crop.
mm-hmm.
It's my land. It's my land, but I rent it to somebody."
Yeah, and I've never had anybody ask me. I've had plenty of people come up, make sure I was okay, but I've never had that come up.
Yeah, it's never been an issue, and if you do this right, it's pretty rare that you're going to do any damage to anything. It's not really an issue.
We got a question about coastal landing spots, if no suitable field, beaches, ? Or worst case, a dry bog.
Well, that's got to be from Peter Dykman, because he lives on Cape Cod. And two things. The trouble, Peter, for everybody except you, we don't know the difference between a wet bog and a dry bog from the air. So all bogs are wet, and all bogs are to be avoided. And with respect to beaches, I've flown into the area of Plymouth, Marston's Mills, and up the coast to this big airport up there. I want to say Middletown, but it's not. And you usually never get to the beach, because by the time you get close enough to the water on a good convection day, you're into the sea breeze, it gets cold, the temperature inside the cockpit drops 10 degrees. You've just flown into the marine air. And if you've been planning this right, you've got a better place to land. I wouldn't normally leave the area of Plymouth unless I knew I could get to Marston's Mills. Once I landed at a school. One of the schoolyards I flew in was the Wing, W-I-N-G school, which I think was in the town of Marston's Mills, because I couldn't quite find the airfield. But that was back in the pre-GPS days. All right, water landing. Rick, I want you to answer this without scaring the out of a whole bunch of new people. But Rick is our pro from Dover on naval aviation.
That's right. Um, and actually, it says, "What about a tree or water landing?" And that was my choice. It was a choice between landing in the trees and landing in the water. I can talk a little bit about both. Luckily, I've never done the first. The landing in the water, I was actually briefed by Doug Jacobs at a cross-country seminar, who was briefed at a world competition in Sweden, where they said, basically, those are your choices, landing in the trees and landing in the water. So the water landings were vastly safer. Um, the rules, the procedure is that you want to keep your wings very level. Obviously, you want to make it look like Scully. And the surprising thing is you want your gear down. People often think that you should be gear up, sort of looks like a boat hull, but there's a old experiment where if you hold a spoon lightly from the back and you touch it into a stream of water coming out of your faucet, you'll see the spoon get sucked into the water. And that convex shape actually works a little bit like an airfoil upside down, and it tends to make the glider dive much deeper into the water if you don't put the gear down to break the surface tension, as they talk about. You should have your spoilers closed. Of my fellow naval aviators, this one would be Admiral Nixon. He went into a lake at Mifflin, left his spoilers up, and they wrapped back around the wing. So, as soon as the water came over, it overpowered the spoilers and caused some damage. You want your flaps up if you have a flap glider before you contact, for the same reason. You don't want to damage the flaps going in. In my case, I was looking, so I got myself, bunched up, and it's part of why I've changed my reserve, because at the last minute I needed to do this mental calculation of how high am I really overglide to the airport. Chose to go into the lake because I knew it would be safe, and that I would be okay, and that the glider was likely to be okay. A few other rules are, don't pick a near the shore, or particularly close to the shore as convenience or shallow, because you really don't want shallow water. The glider does tend to dive into the water. You don't know what's underneath the water, so deep water is safer. And so and close your vents. And so I followed all of those except for the vent closing. When I actually went in, it was like a fire hose of water in my face coming through the side vent. It blew the side vent out, but it also came in through the front vent. And came to a stop, and it was rock solid, floating high, so to speak high. I had about 1.5 inches of freeboard over the cockpit. I was able to open the canopy and no water came in. I had water coming in slowly through the nose release. And so I got out, and it was so stable. I thought for sure I was in shallow water, and got out and was over my head in water. But the glider towed. I did a little side stroke holding on to the front of the glider, and it towed really easily because they're very streamlined, and managed to tow it to to the nearest downwind shore. Figured if I could get it resting on the shore, it wouldn't sink any further, it wouldn't give me any problems. And at which point I realized I had towed it to an island, which was not so wise.
Let me hasten to say that Rick's incident happened in a contest. Hank Nixon's incident happened in a contest. Doug
John
Jacobs
Good.
was talking about a world championship. This
And John
program,
Good landed in a contest.
right? This program is about beginning cross country. It's not the place to talk about where or how to crash a glider because you're doing something high risk or incredibly stupid. There is nothing that we're asking you to do or teaching you to do that's going to put you in that situation. And frankly, if you're going to put yourself in a situation where you're going to be landing in the water, go someplace else and fly, okay? Because that's not what this course, so that's not what this club is about. So I want to avoid talking about horror stories, you know. Between Rick and I, we've probably got, and this is no exaggeration, a combined 70 years of gliding experience. We could sit here and spin out horror stories all night, but that's not going to help anybody do what we want you to do. And what we want you to do is we want you to fly cross country. We want you to do your silver badge, your silver distance. We want you to land out safely and come back and tell us the story. We want to go and get you with a car and trailer if you land out, or I'll jump in a tow plane and go and get you if we can get an aero retrieve. We do this because it's fun, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to talk about all of the bad things that can happen. And so unless there's some other questions, and I'm happy to stay on and try and answer them, you know, we'll bring this program to a close, and with a brief commercial for next week's programs, if I can. And that is, next week's program is on advanced gliding, and particularly in flying efficiently. The original title of the program was How to Fly Gliders Faster. And then I realized there were too many people who said to me, well, I don't need to fly fast, or that means flying fast between thermals, or the word faster created more problems. And I began to realize that what I was really talking about was flying gliders efficiently. You know, think of flying a task, a record task, or a long gliding flight is to climb up a mountain to get to the top of the mountain so you can glide to where you want to be. Well, there are efficient and inefficient pathways up the mountain. And there are places on the mountain where, unfortunately, you take 5 steps up and 2 steps down. So everything you're going to hear about in advanced soaring is going to be about efficiency, and how to make your flying more efficient, and how to analyze a flight that's inefficient. I'm kind of presupposing that people understand basic weather. I'm kind of presupposing that they understand flight analysis programs like CU. We're going to talk about them a lot. And my role is to try and teach you some of the things that I've learned in 40, I guess it's 47 years of flying gliders now, and which unfortunately I sometimes keep having to relearn. I always tell people I'm not sitting here making this presentation because I'm a better pilot than you. I'm making the presentation because I've made more mistakes than you have. So those are my thoughts. Rick?
Yeah, and I will be an attendee at this because I'm very much looking forward to the information that Roy is going to disseminate. I did want to just say one thing to our truly beginning students who are, you know, still looking forward to a silver task. There's going to be great things to learn from the second presentation, but don't get too wrapped up in them in terms of things like, you know, passing up thermals that didn't meet the last one, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know what Roy's presentation is, but in general, more advanced flying fast strategies involve a lot of skills and experience that you've learned from your mistakes of flying slowly. And again, getting a silver distance, if you manage to take 5 hours to do it, it's a prize. As you advance to gold badges and diamond badges, you need to learn how to fly faster in order to cover that amount of distance. It's you against the sunlight, essentially. So it's good to learn the appropriate skills at the appropriate time. Don't go rip-roaring out there with all this advanced knowledge that you think you have, and don't have the experience for it yet. But there are lots of good things, I'm sure, that can be learned from it, in terms of efficient thermaling, and et cetera, et cetera. So.
Just by way of introduction, and I'll explain this in more detail, where we fly in South Africa, the culture is such that we always fly what's called an assigned task or a speed task. And that means every pilot does the exact same task. Now, there'll be a smaller task for new pilots, a medium task for the medium pilots, and the experienced pilots will also get their own task. And we use FAI type turn points, which means every pilot flies over the exact same turn point, and you all come back at the end of the day. And you get out of the glider and you're feeling great because, you know, the computer says, hey, I just flew 80 miles an hour on a 500-kilometer task. And then you say to somebody else, well, how'd you do? And he says, a little slow, it was 92.
Right.
And the next day, you're in the briefing room, looking at everybody's flights and critiquing everybody's flights. And why did that person fly 92 and you flew 80? And when you've done that for 300 or 400 times, and 300 or 400 times, you begin to learn that what it is they do that you don't do, and what it is that you do that they didn't do. And that's what I've learned, and that's what I plan to share in the advanced program.
Well, thank you, Roy. I think we'll wrap it up.
Okay, we're done.
I think so.
Thanks a lot, Roy and Rick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Most welcome.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Now, Rick, stop the recording.
All right, I will do that.